What's up everyone, my name is Rosendo, welcome back to my channel. We are back with another video, and today we have another track review for you guys. Now, it's the third track review in a row. This is about the time where I should be breaking down Atomos, what happened there. Yeah, so obviously Atomos came out a week ago. Well, you're seeing this 2 weeks, it came out a while ago. And normally I would do my track breakdown right now instead of doing a third track review in a row. But I was not in the mood to break down Atomos. I don't know why. I'm just not. Now, there's a few reasons for that. I'll probably talk about why in the actual breakdown, which should be next week if nothing happens. Unless I do another track review, I don't know. But there's an interesting reason why. It just has to do with the track itself and why I made the track, which is the exact same reason why I don't feel like breaking it down. But more so, I just feel like doing another track review. There's a track I definitely want to take a look at. So without further ado, why don't we hop straight into Spotify? All right, we are back in Spotify with another track review, this time taking a look at Guardian Angel by Dimension. Now, I saw on my release radar on Spotify, there was actually a lot of new tracks this week that I could have broken down. But I was kind of excited for this one, so I decided to break this one down. Now, time for the preamble. Two things I want to say before we talk about the track. I want to see if every single preamble I make a little bit different. I talk about the things that are going to apply when I start listening to the track and when I start reviewing them. I don't always need to repeat myself about, you know what, I listened to the track before, even though I'm going to do that today. But there are always a few things I want to say in the preamble that kind of apply to what goes in the review and the experience of my experience listening to this track and things like that. Now, so I think there's two, maybe three things, I can't remember, but definitely at least two. But let's start here. Today we're taking a look at Dimension. We have a drum and bass track for you guys. I'm a big fan of drum and bass. I've talked about it on the channel. I have about 2 drum and bass tracks out. What I feel like I'm missing one. Oh, one way or another. I have another one in the works coming out. Is it only 2? Yeah, it's 2 tracks. 1 remix and another track in the works coming out probably early next year. I think it might be my spring release next year or something. But the point is, I like drum and bass. I'm a fan of Dimension. I was actually just listening to some Dimension over the weekend. I was on a strange kind of drum and bass kick for, 48 hours or so. So I was listening to a lot of drum and bass, listening to some Dimension, listening to his EDC 2025 set. And I think somewhere around the time, last week, I got a clip of this song, probably some promo or something, or maybe him playing it in a set or something, and I was really excited for it. So that brings us to today. The track came out on Friday, and now we're reviewing it today. Okay, so 3 things I want to go over. I might feel like I might be forgetting something, but there were definitely 3 things, at least 3 things I had in mind that I want to talk about before we get into the review. So preamble starts pretty much now. Number 1, I mentioned that I was excited for this track. This leads us into the realm of how do we manage expectations when kind of rating a track? Because as we know, expectations can really skew your perceptions of things. If you get excited for a track and you expect something amazing and you don't get something amazing, but you get something good, you might end up being disappointed and kind of view it negatively. In an objective world, and kind of expectations don't really impact your opinion. So that's why there's not really much I want to say about here. But this was definitely a track I was excited for, which I wanted to mention because when we listen to the track, I'm going to talk about certain aspects of the track that are important to know that I was excited for this track. But that won't impact my review, my final rating of this track. Okay, and now 2 kind of important things. Number 1, let's talk about, again, how I listen to these tracks. Because for those of you who didn't watch the first video, today I record my videos on Sunday. What I end up kind of doing is, as I've talked about how I like to listen to my tracks kind of fully, not my tracks, but the best, and my favorite way of listening to music and tracks is being fully immersed in them. So headphones on, eyes closed, no distractions, really kind of putting yourself in the universe of the track. And that's how I listen to the tracks seriously, especially when it's time for me to rate and review them. Now, I did say a few things. Number 1, I said that I've said before that I can't just listen to a track once. I need to listen to it at least twice to kind of get the full picture and really understand how everything works together to give it a review. And I also said, I believe I said this in the first video, maybe I didn't. What I normally do is I listen to the track for the very first time, just like that, fully immersed. But the thing is, not every track I think is best consumed that way. I think the best tracks are best consumed that way, but not every track is the best consumed that way. Some tracks are just good, driving in the car, and some tracks are made for the club, right? For dancing, for, playing in the background music, for whatever. Their tracks can be made for different purposes, which is why I should have said, or at least I'm saying now, that what I've been doing and what I do is I listened to the track for the first time fully immersed. This was today. I listened to the track for the first time fully immersed. But what I do later is I also just listen to it while driving, while running some errands, just so I can get a different feeling and a different experience listening to the track. There have been times I've listened to tracks, to mixes, to whole albums where I try to listen to them a little bit more immersed, and I'm just not really enjoying the experience. I'm just not really enjoying it. But when I listen to it in a different setting, I really, really like it. And I find that, okay, this is the right setting for me to listen to this. There are actually a few examples. There are a lot of DJ sets actually that I've tried listening to it a little bit more in a little bit more of an immersed environment. And I don't really like, but then I kind of keep them in the back of my head. And sometimes I go to the gym for a workout and I listen to them and I really, really like them. And I realize, okay, this is a good time and place for this track or for this mix, sorry. And there have been times where I've listened to albums a little bit more immersed, trying to get the full experience. And I don't really enjoy it as much, but then I put it in a more casual setting in the background while driving, doing some other activity, and I do like the experience of listening to the album. So that's why what I do is I listen to it fully immersed and try to give it a chance that way, because I think that's how we should be listening to a lot of tracks, and the best tracks are enjoyed that way. But I also want to make sure I give it another chance in another experience. And that's what I did with this track, and it did make a difference. That's why I wanted to mention that first. But I also wanted to mention this because this is a good example of when I listened to this the first time, I had more of a neutral opinion of it, and I'll get to that to the end. But when I listened to it again the second time, I was able to get a clearer picture. So here I'll be listening to it for the third time, but I do think it's important. I do think kind of having all of this available to you and knowing how everything works and experiencing it different ways can help your opinion of the track. And not just your opinion, but kind of the experience and understanding the track. All right, and finally, number 3. We're back into some slippery slopes. I know last video we talked a little about how we interpret art and the art versus the artist and intention and a bunch of other things like that. We're at another slippery slope again. I listen to a lot of Dimension. Interestingly enough, Outlook I didn't listen to a lot of, but I listened to a lot of Millennium. Star Signs, I don't really listen. I knew one Star Signs track, and I knew a few tracks by the artists that make up Star Signs, but I only really knew one Star Signs track. This might be the first artist, depending if you count Millennium or not on the first video, where I've listened to many songs of theirs, and now I'm listening to a new song, and we kind of automatically, subconsciously apply a new lens to it, which is, do we compare this track to their previous releases, whether or not it's new, whether or not it's different or unique, and how it compares to what they've done in the past? Now, again, I think here we're in a slightly slippery slope because to some extent, what an artist has done in the past won't really affect how this track sounds, right? If I had never listened to any Dimension, I would listen to this track one way, but all of a sudden, because I have listened to a lot of Dimension before, I kind of skews my perspective of this track. It's really strange because you want to be as objective as possible and say, okay, you know what? It doesn't matter what Dimension has done in the past. If this is new, if it's original, if it's unique, if it's very similar to his other stuff, does it matter? Does it not matter? I don't know. You might want to say it doesn't matter because you're listening to this track on its own. The other things don't really affect this, but subconsciously, you will have to compare it to other things because if you listen to the same thing over and over again, and you get another track that sounds the same, it subconsciously, whether you like it or not, it will get dull, or stale, I should say. But more importantly, I do think there's a scenario and kind of a universe where you have to consider what an artist has done in the past, because as I mentioned, in some ways you have to consider uniqueness and how original certain things are when you rate tracks. Now, again, it's another slippery slope here because then you have to ask yourself, okay, does an artist need to do something drastically new every single time? If they find a sound, are they not allowed to stick with it? Where is the line of, okay, it's still this artist's sound, their style, their music, but it's not something that they've done already before? And how do we determine if it's new or not, or if it's similar or if it's not similar, and whether or not it matters? These are just things that I wanted to put out there because they will affect my perception, and they might affect your perception of this track. If you've heard Dimension before, or if you've never heard Dimension before, even if you've never heard drum and bass before. That's why there will always be biases, and this is kind of a theory I've been developing about how there might be biases of when you first hear a genre, you might be biased towards those tracks you've heard first because they're all new and original if you've never heard anything like it before. And then kind of as you listen to more music, you start comparing it to what you heard first, and the other stuff might sound unoriginal and stale already, but of course I try to be as objective as possible. So again, let's get to listening to it, but I just wanted to mention that it's a slippery slope. Do you compare it? Do you take it as is? Do you take originality into consideration? Can you compare it to other things? Can you compare it to other genres other tracks of the same genre? How original is it? it's a slippery slope, but those are things that we do take into consideration, which leads us to finally being able to listen to this track. So again, that's kind of what I want to save preambles for giving some context, clarifying a few things, giving some information that you might need to know when it comes to how I review these tracks, how I listen to the specific track, because things like that are important. All right, but why don't we actually listen to the track now? Let's get to the actual listening. As a reminder, we can all listen to it at the same time, but there will be no audio playing because of copyright. So if you have Guardian Angel by Dimension loaded, we are going to start listening to it in 3, 2, 1, and begin. Automatically, it's a very orchestral track, especially for Dimension, and I love orchestral, cinematic, emotional tracks. Strings, I'm a huge fan of strings. I don't think I've had a single track that has not had strings on it that I've made. And we're starting off with a fantastic, nice, beautiful intro, I might even say. Really nice vocals, too. Very atmospheric. Not touching on lyrics, but again, just the actual melody and the rhythm of the lyrics. Very, very orchestral, cinematic intro that I really like. Plus the artwork, right? We're not talking about artwork, but all that together and combined gives you a very, very interesting, unique, and this is definitely unique, definitely for Dimension 2, a unique intro. And a very nice big synths, big chords with a very nice kind of a ethereal vocal. Very nice intro so far. I really like this track so far. I'm enjoying this right now. You get that Dimension, you get the pre-drop, the build-up. You get a kind of a very recognizable Dimension style sound and melody. Going into the build-up, you still have the actually different types of vocals, but some nice vocals here. Very dramatic build-up, we'll call it. Into a Dimension style drop. Now that I'm listening to it for the third time, I'm not gonna lie, I'm liking it a little bit more. My original gripe with this was that it's a very, very unique intro and it has a lot of potential, but you get a pretty standard Dimension drop. Not a bad thing, but I don't think, again, it's a good thing in this case, especially when you have such potential of, doing something beautiful with the intro and the vocals and everything. This is still a nice drop. I'll come back to that because this part is important. We do bring it down and we get some more vocals here. I really like this part because it's definitely unique for drum and bass in general, right? Bringing it down so dramatically, especially with such kind of emotional vocals and song structure. And I've mentioned progression-wise that if you get to somewhere a different way, it can kind of sound a little bit better. So I actually do really, really like this area because although it's very similar to the intro just starts by starting, but here we're coming down from a drop. So I really like that how the drop got filtered down and then we get another low energy area. We got the other build-up, slightly unique here, actually, because we get the melody with the vocals, but in no drop drums, not in the drop. We're kind of still in the build-up here. Build-up feels like it comes a little bit quicker this time around into the second drop. Into the second drop, sounding very, very similar to the first. Not necessarily doing anything super, super new here with the second drop sounding similar to the first, but it does an okay job. Hold that thought though. We're going to keep going. Listen very closely to the next 8 bars. Right here. Very nice switch up. 4 bars have gone by. 8 bars have gone by. You can tell the track is slowing down now. Back to the Guardian Angel vocals. Track comes to an end. Drop. All right. Now, I'll be completely honest with you guys. I enjoyed the track a little bit more listening to it the third time around. I think my rating will be the same, and I already know what I'm going to rate this. But I think I enjoyed this a little bit more listening to it the third time around. And actually, before we get into the breakdown, because I'm going to timestamp this in the description, one last filler thing that I forgot to mention at the beginning. That way you guys know, if you read the timestamps, and you guys know you can skip this part if you don't really care, is that I forgot to mention this in the beginning. Just to clarify, people, I choose the song I'm going to review without having listened to it, because I don't want to just choose songs I like, just choose songs that are complex. Sometimes I want there to be a point where I choose a song and I don't like it, but I still review it anyways, just so you guys can see how I grade these things. I do like the song, but the point is, I go through my release radar and I think, okay, this is the song I'm going to review. I already decide, and then I do my whole thing. I listen to it, I do all that stuff, and then I make a video. So don't think I'm just choosing songs by artists I like, even though I do, right? Because I'm going to choose songs by artists I listen to. But don't think I'm, one of these days I might choose a song that I won't like, but right now it's all songs I like. I don't want you guys to think that I'm only choosing songs that I know I like to review them. I choose the song first and then I review it, and then I kind of make the review later. The Star Signs remix was actually an exception because I heard that in the car and I thought this would be a good one to kind of set a baseline for a 5 out of 10 in. And then I immersed myself and then I did the whole thing. But yeah, the point is I choose a song first and I commit to it. So just wanted to clarify that. All right, so reviewing Guardian Angel by Dimension. What are some of the things that I like about this? What are some things I don't like about this? This is one of those times where I really wish I could go through the audio and play it and just kind of scrub through a few things and compare back and forth. But unfortunately, I can't do that. I mean, I could, but again, I want these videos to be a staple of my channel, so no copyright infringement intended. But let's talk about the track. As I was saying, I'll be honest with you guys, the third time I listened to it, I kind of liked it a little bit more. The first time I listened to it, I was pretty neutral, slightly disappointed because I had high expectations. The second time I listened to it, I liked it a little bit more. I kind of got the full picture. And this third time, scrutinizing it again once more, I liked it even more. I'm not sure if my rating will change, and I'll mention what my rating is at the end because I'm going to give it something very specific for a very specific reason. But let's actually talk about the track now, because there are a few things I mentioned in the preamble that I want to kind of come back to now, starting with the expectations. And half of it is expectations, half of it is just an actual critique of the track, because you have this very nice intro, the very nice vocals, a very atmospheric, cinematic, kind of almost orchestral intro that I do wish the song did a little bit more with that. You get a very standard Dimension style drop, two of them actually, in the first drop and the second drop, and it's so very much Dimension's original sound that it's not too new. The intro is new, but the drop itself and the track itself it feels kind of more like standard Dimension, and it doesn't feel like it's too original, which is why I was left slightly, and I am left slightly disappointed that because you have such a beautiful intro with the vocals and everything, that the whole track maybe didn't take a slightly bigger turn, right? You still have something unique for Dimension. You still have something unique for drum and bass, but I was left slightly disappointed, which is actually why I brought the point about the progression, about how it comes down, that I really, really like. I think it does add some nice flair and uniqueness to the track and to the progression, and even to kind of Dimension sound in a way. So I really like that aspect. So where were we? Again, slightly disappointed that this track didn't do a little bit more. I don't want to tread on the slope of, every time an artist needs to reinvent the wheel, but with Dimension already committing to the kind of this ethereal sound and vocals, I do wish there was something a little bit more. You might be able to, be generous and say, okay, the ethereal vocals is already that new thing. And you might agree, you might disagree. I don't know. But that's why I say I do like the fact that the track comes down. But at the end of the day, I kind of wish this was a little bit more emotional, that it was a little bit more unique for Dimension, instead of having a pretty standard kind of Dimension drop that you get in a lot of his tracks. Now, that aside, the biggest thing I do want to give this track credit for, and it's hard, I've changed my mind, right? I listened to it the third time, and I'm leaning more and more positive towards this track, is now that I'm listening to it for the third time, I'm going to give it more credit than I originally was going to give it for its progression. The very first time I listened to it, I thought the progression was pretty lackluster, and it's not revolutionary, but I'm not going to say it's lackluster anymore. I think it definitely has a decent progression going for it, and I mean decent in a positive way. So I will give it credit for its progression. Let's talk about that. You get the intro, you get the vocals, you get the build up into the drop, and then you bring the track back down in a really nice way, where I mentioned that I already liked it because it was a little bit unique for the drum and bass genre. But at first my thought was, it sounds too much like the kind of the intro. But once you listen to it again and you get a little bit more of that kind of movement and storytelling, where you realize in the intro, you're not coming down, you're just starting kind of at the flat ground, we'll call it. And then you bring it up and then you come down. Even though the second verse, I call them verses, sounds pretty similar to the first. Because you get it after a drop, it does add more progression than I originally gave this track credit for. Not only that, but the vocals in the second verse have a little bit more of the melody playing to them before you get the second drop. I still don't think the progression is all that elaborate, because even when listening to it for the third time, in the grand scheme of things, when you really take the track beginning to end and as a whole, it has the progression, but it doesn't quite kind of do anything super elaborate. The word I would use in this case is the storytelling, and I still haven't made the video or necessarily even made up my mind on what I mean when I say these things. The track has the progression, which means that it is unique from, verse to drop to verse to drop and things like that, and it goes in a nice pattern. But I don't think the storytelling is quite there on, what we're trying to do with that progression and how the changes really contribute to what you do with the track and the journey you take the listener on. That's kind of what I get at when I talk about the storytelling. Especially since the vocals are same, since the melody are the same, you're placing them in new areas, which, and to be clear, this is something I do a lot in my tracks. That's why I think that I give it a little bit more credit for the progression, because it's something that I do a lot, which is this is when I say you don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to do something crazy new every single time, but just taking the same elements, and I'll come back to this, taking the same elements and just kind of putting them in different areas, that's already a good way to introduce some progression to your track. And but again, the storytelling matters, and you're just gonna have to kind of trust me on that. How you kind of take the whole track beginning to end, and how you get from place to place, and what you're trying to accomplish also matters, which I don't think the track quite nailed, but the progression it did a really good job at. Now, let's talk about the thing that I really, really like about this track, which again, I really wish I could cut in, but it's basically in the second half of the second verse, when I was asking you guys to pay a little bit closer attention. That's when you get a really nice switch up in storytelling and progression, where after you get the second drop, you get the vocals again, Guardian Angel, and then you get new vocals that you haven't heard before, with those 8 bars right there. Those 8 bars I really, really like. That's where, again, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel, but just adding a little bit more of a unique melody there to take you from the second drop that already sounds pretty similar to the first, but has something new and a kind of a nuance to it and something a little bit more unique to it, is really, really nice about this track. What ends up happening, actually, let me just finish that thought though. I do like that part about that track. That's a good thing. I like it. I very, very much like those little 8 bars. Now back to the progression thing and the storytelling thing, because I do like that area where you add the new vocals and the new melody, those 8 bars there. But, now that I listen to it, and I listen to it for the third time, and I hear everything beginning to end, when you get that uniqueness, it kind of leaves you wanting a little bit more. I don't think it quite satisfies your need for, okay, we got something new and unique, and now we can end the track. I think it leaves you wanting more, especially because you've already listened to a lot of it, and I don't know, something about it being in the second drop, where if it were dragged out for maybe another 16 bars, if there were another 16 bars or something, or not 16 bars, if there were another 8 bars, dragging that area out to 16 bars, giving it a little bit more of a nuance where you can kind of come back a little bit nicer instead of kind of introducing something very new at the end, but it doesn't feel like you really come back down to it. And when you do come back down to it, the track just ends. It's hard to say exactly under words. You know what? Let me just listen to it again. Hold that thought. See, it just strikes, it's hard exactly to just put into words, but I just think it strikes a weird balance of introducing something new and just barely bringing it back to where you were before. And it doesn't quite kind of give you that closure. And I think part of it has to do with something similar to the Moon, where you get some nice progression in the track, you introduce some nice nuances, and then once you do that, it opens the door for you to be a little bit more complex instead of adding the small amount of complexity and thinking that that'll cut it, even though it kind of, again, I think it helps the track, but it doesn't quite develop it into something a little bit more that I normally like. Now, a lot of this is bias. I've talked about how I like long tracks and tracks with complex progression, and I still stand by that. I want my tracks to have complex progression, because you get a lot of tracks like, not like this, you get a lot of tracks like, even Stars, the Rocketeer is a bad example. But you get a lot of average tracks out there in the world. So having a little bit more to it is always a good thing. And not just in kind of a little bit more in standard progression, but a little bit more in the experience. So something about introducing a little bit of nuance here and barely bringing it back down, I don't think, barely bringing it back doesn't really help, especially when it comes to what we're going to call, what I've deemed Rosendo versus the crash outros, because again, I'm not really a big fan of this crash outro, and part of it has to do with the fact that you add some uniqueness here and then you just basically go straight into the crash outro. It's unique for 4 bars, 8 bars here. This area unique is also a little bit unique for another 4 bars. You get a little bit more of the vocals here. And then, 8 bars of uniqueness, 4 bars of some more uniqueness, then straight to 4 bars of what you've heard before to bring it back. I think, and then into the crash right here, I think kind of hurts it. I'm not a big fan of that kind of that narrative, that storytelling there, and kind of the experience of this area right here. But again, that's just me nitpicking because this is a time and place for me to nitpick. Overall, I do like this track. Very nice intro. Let's go through it one more time. Very nice intro. Very nice drop, but you come down from the drop into the second verse to build it back up, and you have some uniqueness in the second verse, but overall the track experience doesn't feel too elaborate. So then you kind of get the second drop right here, and then you get some nice unique vocals right here that I do like, that do give you a good switch up, but the experience is kind of dampened here. You get the crash outro that I'm neutral towards. Definitely don't think it helps here, and I don't think it hurts, but I'm very neutral, if not slightly negative, toward the crash outro here. That's just because I wanted a little bit more. And there you go. That is where we are at. All right, so where does that leave us with the track? Where does that leave us with my final rating? Again, I'm trying not to... There is a scenario where a part of my rating has to do with the fact that I've listened to a lot of Dimension before, and this is very standard for Dimension. It doesn't feel too... The drop itself doesn't feel too original, but the vocals are very original. The intro is very original. Even the progression, I really like how it comes back down in the second verse, more so than most drum and bass tracks is what I'm getting at, and Dimension tracks. So where does the rating leave? Now, we're in one last slippery slope here, where I like whole numbers because it forces you to commit to something, or else you could just be like, hey, I'm going to give this track a 5.3489, and then you just kind of, you're just start splitting hairs here, and then it's like, okay, well, how concrete is your criteria really for you to give it a 5.238 or something like that? But I've never been opposed of half ratings. I feel like half is the precision that you can kind of rate things at. Maybe, I don't think I want to get into quarters. It gets very slippery when you go into quarters. But all that really means is I'm probably putting this right at a 5.5. I think 5.5 out of 10. That's where you go. I want to see if I can leave my ratings to halves. Maybe in the future we'll get into the quarters. But I don't give it a 5. I don't give it a 6. I think a 5.5 is a good rating. Now, I mentioned earlier about how I would elaborate on this when it came to my rating. This is one of those areas where I put in a 5.5 because I think I need more time with this track. And I think we all need more time with this track to see how it fits in the grand scheme of things of Dimension's discography and in the realm of drum and bass. The way I see it, this track can go 2 ways. Either over time, I'll appreciate it a little bit more and it's going to kind of come up to the 6 and I'll end up giving this a 6 out of 10 track. Or maybe because of everything I said, it won't stand the test of time and it's going to kind of come down to a 5. And over time, I'm going to think, okay, this track is okay. It does some nice things, but it doesn't do anything too elaborate that, I would give it anything higher than a 5 at. I'm at a 5.5 right now. I'm right in the middle. And that's not me trying to be indecisive. I don't want this to sound like I'm being indecisive, even though I can sometimes be that way. I don't really want to commit to something because, like I said, I might have a different opinion 3 years from now, especially on a track like this that has very nice things going for it. But it's hard to say. I think 5.5 is fair, though. I think it's a nice objective rating when you consider things like how original it is for Dimension and how I feel like the drop leaves a little bit more to be desired, especially how it's a little bit standard for a Dimension drop. It's not too unique, but the verse itself is unique. The kind of the experience and the experience as well. But the progression is unique. The sound design and the atmosphere is what I was getting at. The atmosphere is definitely unique. You're right in the middle here. You're right at that 5.5. And I think only time will kind of further develop that rating. Again, credit where credit's due. There's a lot of really nice things going for this track. I think it's a really nice track that has nice elements, but when you listen to it as an experience and the whole thing, then you realize that it's a little bit lackluster. Not necessarily lackluster, but it's a little bit more average and not as elaborate as A, you might want out of tracks, and definitely B, what you could have done with some really nice vocals, an orchestral intro, and things like that. I think that's why you put it at 5. It's exactly what I said. Could have done more. I wish it did more, but it still did things well. So I think for me, 5 out of 5, perfect rating for this track. And we'll just see. We'll just see if that changes in the future. I can see it going to a 6. I can see it going to a 5. I don't think there's a scenario where this goes to a 4 or where this goes to a 7. Maybe 6.5, but I think this will probably, again, 6 is a good rating, so I think there's maybe a scenario where this ends at a 6. But again, last thing, as a reminder, 5.5, that's above average. And this track has good things going for it, and there are things that I do like about this. There are elements that I like about this track. So 5.5 is not meant to be a bad thing. Let's keep that in mind, people. 5.5 out of 10. All right, and that is about it. This was actually kind of a long video, actually. Now I do think, here's me rambling again. I will be honest, I do kind of like the fact that, you know, I can talk this long about track ratings, and the track ratings might be long because, like I said, I feel like that's where I excel. This is the region where I can really nitpick and scrutinize and take all these small things. So the fact that I'm the type of person that will make long track ratings, I think really just goes to show all the things that I take into consideration and all the things that, you know, some people might brush off, like things like expectations. They might let expectations get in the way. They might let, you know, their biases of other genres or tracks of the same artist get in the way. And those are things that I do acknowledge might get in the way, but I also, A, try to be objective, and B, that's why I like to mention them in the preamble, so we kind of know, we have some context about what goes into rating these tracks. So again, a little bit of a longer video, but I'm glad I talk about all these things because I believe that's where I excel, taking everything into consideration. But you guys can let me know if you agree or disagree. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments. Let me know if you agree with this rating. Let me know what you think about the track. Let me know if you like it, if you dislike it, if you think that how unique it is for Dimension, how unique it is for drum and bass, how you feel about things like the vocals and the atmosphere and the really, really nice sound design, things this has going for the track. And let me know if you think that the drop or, you know, maybe the track as a whole might not live up to it. Let me know if you had expectations for the track, if you've never heard it before and you were all of a sudden surprised about a track like this. And things like that. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But other than that, that is all I have for you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.